Please be seated as you are able. In our gospel reading for today, we're going to read the story of Lazarus. Just as a bit of background information for you, Mary, Martha, and Lazarus were all brothers and sisters, and they were very close friends of Jesus. Probably the closest friends he had outside of the 12 disciples. He actually stayed with them whenever he was in Jerusalem. They lived in Bethany, which was just a short walk from Jerusalem. And he would often look forward to spending time with them. Today's story is a moment in their lives when tragedy and death entered in. Our gospel reading for today comes from John chapter 11.
Glory to you, Lord.
A man named Lazarus was sick. He lived in Bethany with his sisters Mary and Martha. This is the Mary who later poured the expensive perfume on the Lord's feet and wiped them with her hair. Her brother Lazarus was sick, so the two sisters sent a message to Jesus telling him, "Lord, your dear friend is very sick." But when Jesus heard about it, he said, "Lazarus' sickness will not end in death. No, it happened for the glory of God, so that the Son of God will receive glory from this." So although Jesus loved Mary, Martha, and Lazarus, he stayed where he was for the next 2 days. Finally, he said to his disciples, "Let's go back to Judea." But his disciples objected. "Rabbi," they said, "only a few days ago the people of Judea were trying to stone you. Are you going to go there again?" Jesus replied, "Our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but now I will go and wake him up." The disciples said, "Lord, if he's sleeping, he soon will get better." They thought Jesus meant Lazarus was simply sleeping, but Jesus meant Lazarus had died. So he told them plainly, "Lazarus is dead, and for your sakes, I'm glad I wasn't there, for now you will really believe me. Come, let's go see him." Thomas, nicknamed the twin, said to his fellow disciples, "Let's go too and die with Jesus." When Jesus arrived in Bethany, he was told that Lazarus had already been in his grave for 4 days. Bethany was only a few miles down the road from Jerusalem, and many of the people had come to console Martha and Mary in their loss. When Martha got word that Jesus was coming, she went out to meet him, but Mary stayed in the house. Martha said to Jesus, "Lord, if only you had been here, my brother would not have died. But even now I know that God will give you whatever you ask." Jesus told her, "Your brother will rise again." "Yes," Martha said, "he will rise when everyone rises at the last day." Jesus told her, "I am the resurrection and the life. Anyone who believes in me will live, even after dying. Everyone who lives in me and believes in me will never die. Do you believe this, Martha?" "Yes, Lord," she told him. "I have always believed you are the Messiah, the Son of God, and the one who's come into the world from God." Then she returned to Mary, and she called Mary aside from the mourners and told her, "The teacher is here and wants to see you." So Mary immediately went to see Jesus. Jesus had stayed outside the village at the place where Martha had met him. And when the people who were at the house consoling Mary saw her leave so hastily, they assumed she was going to Lazarus' grave to weep. So they followed her there. When Mary arrived and saw Jesus, she fell at his feet and said, "Lord, if only you had been here, my brother wouldn't have died." They told him, when Jesus saw her weeping and saw other people wailing with her, a deep anger welled up within him, and he was deeply troubled. "Where have you put him?" he asked them. And they told him, "Lord, come and see." Then Jesus wept. The people who were standing nearby said, "See how much he loved him?" But some said, "Ah, this man healed a blind man. Couldn't he have kept Lazarus from dying?" Jesus was still angry as he arrived at the tomb. A cave with a stone rolled across its entrance. "Roll the stone aside," Jesus told them. But Martha, the dead man's sister, protested, "Lord, he has been there 4 days. The smell will be terrible." Jesus responded, didn't I tell you that you would see God's glory if you believed? So they rolled the stone aside. Then Jesus looked up to heaven and said, Father, thank you for hearing me. You always hear me. But I said it out loud for the sake of all those people standing here, so that they will believe you sent me. Then Jesus shouted, Lazarus, come out! And the dead man came out, his hands and feet bound in grave clothes, his face wrapped in a headcloth. And Jesus told them, unwrap him and let him go. Many of the people who were with Mary believed in Jesus when they saw this happen. The Gospel of our Lord.
Praise to you, O Christ.
Today we get a very intimate glimpse in the life of Jesus. A moment when death, pain, suffering entered into the lives of his very close friends. It's worth noting, there are several things that stand out in this story that are very important for us to know. One is that Jesus chooses to be late. He gets word. He knows that Lazarus is sick. And he doesn't hurry right away to Bethany. He waits. He knows what's going on. He knows what's going to happen. And he chooses to stay, to not go right away. We can also note that at times, Jesus has done many miraculous healings, including far distant healings. He has prayed and people in another town have gotten healed. So there's nothing stopping him in that moment from praying and asking God to heal Lazarus. But Jesus doesn't. He clearly states that there's a plan going on here. But we have to note that that plan that Jesus has involves Mary and Martha and Lazarus and others having to suffer. We can't escape that truth, that reality, that is part of what Jesus has intended. Because Jesus has a bigger plan. Something greater that's going to happen. So Jesus waits, and then Lazarus dies. Jesus is aware that Lazarus dies. He confirms it for his disciples. When his disciples don't get it, he clearly says, Lazarus is dead. Now it's time for us to go. And you'd be right in asking the question in your hearts, what do you mean now's the time to go, Jesus? Shouldn't you have shown up a bit earlier? Come on, they needed you days ago, not now. And of course, when Jesus does arrive, Martha first goes to meet him. She hears the commotion. She knows he's coming. So she goes out to meet him on the road. And her first words are, Lord, if only you had been here. I don't know if there's any more honest pleas in Scripture than the voice of both Mary and Martha as they confront Jesus. And the pain inside them is so great that they can't hold it in. They can't be respectful. They gotta come out and say it because it's what's in their heart. God, you didn't show up. You failed us. If you had just been here, if you had just not taken your time, if you had just come when we asked, this would not have happened. They're being open and honest about their pain. And it's a pain that if you have lost someone whom you loved, you know this pain, don't you? Especially when people die at an age far too young. We can know, we relate to what Mary and Martha are feeling in this moment. They have an intimate and close enough relationship with Jesus that they can say what is truly on their hearts, the pain that they feel. They've lost their brother, but they've also been let down by their close friend, Jesus. And it's too much for them to bear in the moment. And so they blurt out those honest truths to Jesus. And Jesus responds not with condemnation, not with ridicule about their faith. He responds with compassion. He is feeling in this moment a full spectrum of emotions, the same things that Mary and Martha are feeling. He's weeping at the pain that they're having to live through. He is angry at the circumstances that deprived Lazarus from them. But he's also reassuring them, telling them, I am the resurrection and the life. Any who believe in me will not die, but they will live even though they die. Believe, Mary, Martha, and Lazarus will rise again. Mary and Martha don't quite understand. Oh yeah, I know at the end of the day, when we go to heaven, yeah, I know. But no, Jesus says, believe, we will have life. It's also worth noting that Jesus sees how the people around Mary and Martha are acting. You see, Mary and Martha, there are some people that are saying, oh, look at Jesus, he really does care. But many people are being very verbally abusive. They're being, what's the word? They're criticizing Jesus. They dare to say, this guy, he healed a man born blind. Couldn't he have been here to done this? They're mocking Jesus because he failed in their eyes. Mary and Martha and Lazarus. So they're very quick to point out when Jesus failed. He didn't show up. And I think that has got Jesus more angry than anything else. Because Mary and Martha are hearing a story of lies that's very deceptive, it's very cunning, that says, see, you are suffering, that means God doesn't care about you. That means God's too busy to pay attention. God's too busy to show up. And that's what these people around Mary and Martha are saying to them. And that same false narrative is being told today so often to people when they encounter the tragedy that Mary and Martha and Lazarus encounter. This world says to us, see, God really doesn't care. God really isn't involved in your life. God has abandoned you. And the anger of that narrative, the anger of that story wells up in Jesus because it's simply not true. So Jesus turns, he tells them to remove away the stone, even beside their protests. And powerfully says the words, Lazarus, come forth. And Lazarus comes out, and people are amazed. You see, right now, we live in the in-between times. We live in between the moment when God created this world in perfect splendor, in perfect glory, and the time when God calls us all home to live in paradise amidst God's perfect fellowship and perfect love. We live in between those two moments, and we live in a broken world where tragically there is pain, and there is suffering, and there is death. And those things are not going away. But we also live with this false narrative that tells us God does not care, God doesn't show up, God doesn't save, God allows your loved ones to die. And that is a lie. And we see that in the story because Jesus was there. Jesus saw what was going on. Jesus understood the pain that they were going through. Jesus walked alongside them, met with them. Jesus wept with them. And Jesus reassured them and said, I know this is tough, but believe, because all who believe in me, even though they die, they will live. We live in this in-between time. We are not abandoned by God, because in those moments when tragedy strikes, in those moments when your loved one who's been on life support, and you have to turn that machine off and watch them die. In those moments when a father of 3 all of a sudden has a heart attack and dies. In those moments when a mother driving a minivan with her children in the back is in an accident because of another drunk driver. In those moments when tragedy, when suffering and pain enter into your life, Jesus cries out and says, no, death, you cannot have them. They are mine. And even though we experience the power and the pain of what loss is, death doesn't get to win. Because Jesus is the resurrection and the life. And Jesus does show up, and Jesus does save in those moments, and Jesus does take those glorious, wonderful saints home, just like he will do one day for each and every one of us. We have to hold on to that truth, because outside of that truth, life just doesn't have meaning. But Jesus saw the bigger picture. He saw things in light of eternity. And the narrative, the truth, the story, the good news that Jesus wants us to hold on to today, is that death doesn't win. Jesus doesn't let go. Jesus shows up, and Jesus does indeed save. Amen.
Amen.
Let's stand for our song.